The story of a man who had absolutely nothing. No money, no future, and no clear direction in life. Every day felt the same, and every year looked no different from the last. He was stuck in a cycle that slowly drained his energy, his confidence, and his belief that things could ever change. But everything shifted the moment he discovered one simple habit that most people ignore. He started waking up at exactly 5 a.m. every single day. No excuses, no delays. No second chances with the snooze button. Just one decision, repeated daily. And in just 90 days, his entire life transformed in ways he never thought possible. His income improved, his mindset sharpened, and his future finally had direction. What he did during those quiet early morning hours might surprise you, and it might be exactly what you need right now. So before we go further, think about this. What time are you watching this video right now? Because that answer might explain everything. Thomas is 32 years old this year. He isn't unemployed, he isn't drifting aimlessly, and he isn't running away from responsibility. Every day, at exactly 8 p.m., he shows up at a large warehouse on the outskirts of the city to begin his night shift. The work is repetitive, patrolling, observing, keeping everything safe until dawn. At 6 a.m., as the city slowly wakes up, Thomas ends his shift and quietly steps out into the street, wrapped in the familiar exhaustion. He lives in a rented room so small it can barely fit a thin mattress on the floor. An old fan rattles noisily through the night, and the light bulb flickers on and off, much like his own life. His clothes are worn, his shoes have holes in the toes, but he wears them every day because replacing them is a luxury he can't afford. His salary is just enough to pay rent, buy cheap food, and cover bus fare to work. No surplus, no savings, no clear future. But what exhausts Thomas the most isn't poverty. It's the feeling of being stuck. He works hard, never misses a shift, never complains. Yet every morning on his way home, as he passes houses glowing with warm lights, he sees another world. Families having breakfast together, children getting ready for school, men in neat shirts leaving home for work, and he wonders why his own life feels so out of sync. Thomas has tried to change. He applied for better jobs, but he only has a high school diploma. He thought about learning new skills, but after long nights of work, his body craves nothing but sleep. When he lies down at 7 a.m. and sleeps until afternoon, he always feels as though he's living in reverse, out of step with the world. Life keeps moving forward while he stands still, watching time slip away from him day by day, in silence. The call came on a cold morning, just as Thomas had finished his shift. On the other end was his sister's voice, trembling and urgent. "Thomas, come home right away. Mom collapsed. She's at the clinic." It was only a short sentence, but it was enough to make his heart tighten. Thomas stood frozen for a few seconds on the empty road, then climbed onto the earliest bus back to his hometown. The 3-hour journey dragged on, slow as an entire lifetime. The small clinic sat quietly on the edge of the peaceful village. When Thomas walked in, his mother was lying on an old metal bed, her face pale, her thin hands resting lightly on a worn blanket. The doctor said she wasn't suffering from a serious illness, just exhaustion from years of overwork, poor nutrition, and prolonged worry. But what she needed, rest, medicine, proper meals, were things their family could not easily afford. Thomas's mother held his hand, her voice so weak it almost dissolved into the air. "I don't have much time left. Don't live your whole life like me, working endlessly and still being poor." There was no blame, no complaint, just a gentle plea that hurt deeply. Thomas nodded, swallowing back his tears. He said everything would be fine, that he was trying his best. But he knew it himself, those were nothing more than empty words of comfort. That night, Thomas sat by his mother's bedside for a long time. He looked at her wrinkled hands, hands that had worked the fields for decades, and suddenly realized a heavy truth. She had worked hard her entire life, yet her life had never truly changed. And he, despite being from a different generation, was walking down the exact same path. Before dawn, Thomas stepped outside. The clock showed exactly 5 a.m., The village was still asleep, morning mist blurring the dirt road, a few farmers quietly carrying their hoes toward the fields. The air was cool, the silence almost unreal. Standing there at daybreak, Thomas suddenly understood that what frightened him most was not poverty but repeating a life of endless struggle with no way out. At that moment, something inside him broke open. It wasn't despair, but anger at his own helplessness. Thomas clenched his fists and whispered, like an oath, "This can't go on anymore. No matter the cost, I have to find another way." And for the first time in many years, he didn't just wish for change, he decided to change. On the early morning bus leaving the village, Thomas sat quietly by the window, his tired eyes following the thin ribbons of mist still lingering over the fields. His mother's words from the night before echoed in his mind, heavy like a question without an answer. Across the aisle, Thomas noticed a man in his early 50s, simply but neatly dressed, sitting upright with an old book in his hands. What caught Thomas's attention wasn't the book, but the rare sense of calm the man seemed to carry at such an early hour. After some hesitation, Thomas struck up a conversation. The man smiled and introduced himself as Mr. Chun. When Thomas asked why he was awake so early and riding such an ordinary bus, Mr. Chun replied gently that he woke up at 4:30 every day, went to bed before 9 p.m., and considered the morning the most important time of his life. Not to make money right away, but to read, think, and plan while the world was still asleep. The conversation gradually deepened. Mr. Chun asked Thomas about his job and daily routine. When he heard about Thomas's night shifts and daytime sleep, he slowly shook his head. "You're not lacking in effort," he said. "You're just living out of sync with the world. You're awake when everything stops, and asleep when opportunities appear. How can you move forward that way?" Then he leaned in and lowered his voice, as if sharing a secret. "The hours from 5 to 7 in the morning are when people lay the foundation for their lives. No one disturbs you. No one competes for your time. It's just you and your future." Those words weren't loud or dramatic, yet they made Thomas's heart stir. He suddenly realized that his problem wasn't that he did too little, but that he had never set aside time to truly change himself. As the bus approached the stop, Mr. Chun wrote a phone number on a business card and placed it in Thomas's hand. "If you're truly serious," he said, "call me. But only when you're ready to live with discipline." Thomas stepped off the bus, gripping the card tightly, looking up at the sky as it slowly brightened. And if you're listening to this now, there's a good chance you're standing at a moment like Thomas's, a moment when you begin questioning yourself. If you want to keep following stories like this, small encounters with the power to change an entire life, subscribe to the channel now. Who knows, the next story might be your turning point. That meeting did not end with a single inspirational piece of advice. A few days later, Thomas sat across from Mr. Chun in a small cafe, midday sunlight slanting through the glass window. There were no long-winded speeches. Mr. Chun opened a notebook, placed his pen on the table, and spoke plainly. "If you want to change your life, emotion isn't enough. You need a system." He sketched a simple house on the page. "Your life right now is like a crooked house," he said, "not because you don't try hard, but because you've never built a foundation. You're only focused on surviving." Then he circled a block of time, from 5 to 7 a.m. "This is the foundation, 2 hours a day, no more, no less." Mr. Chun began breaking down each hour with precision. The first hour, from 5 to 6 a.m., was for building skills. No news, no entertainment, no scrolling on the phone, only learning things that could increase the value of your labor. A professional skill, a certification, knowledge that could generate income. "The internet has already given you everything for free," he said. "The only thing missing is discipline." The second hour, from 6 to 7 a.m., was for building yourself. 30 minutes of movement, walking, light jogging, stretching, the remaining 30 minutes for reading, thinking, or planning the day ahead. If your body is weak, your willpower will weaken with it, Mr. Chun emphasized. No one can build a lasting life on an exhausted body. Then he laid out 3 non-negotiable rules. First, wake up at 5 a.m. every day, including weekends. Second, go to bed before 9 p.m. No exceptions. Third, accept that the first 21 days will be miserable. The body will resist. The mind will look for excuses to quit. But after 90 days, the old version of you will no longer exist. I don't promise you'll be rich, Mr. Chun said slowly. I promise only this. If you follow this system for 3 months, you will no longer be the person you are today. Thomas looked at the page filled with notes, then at his own hands. For the first time, the road ahead was no longer vague. It was clear, concrete, and most importantly, possible. The first days were a real battle. The alarm clock ringing at 5 a.m. felt like torture. Thomas's body fought back fiercely. His eyes were heavy, his head ached, and every muscle seemed to beg for just a little more sleep. Some mornings, he sat on the edge of the bed for a long time, wrestling with a single thought: just today. But then the image of his mother lying in her hospital bed, along with Mr. Chun's stern gaze, pushed him to stand up. The first week passed in exhaustion and loneliness. While the city was still wrapped in darkness, Thomas sat alone at a small desk, his old phone placed in front of him, studying free Excel lessons online. The numbers, formulas, and tables were confusing and unfamiliar at first. Many times, he didn't even understand what he was doing. He just kept going because he had made a promise to himself. At Sexa, he put on his jacket and went outside to walk around the neighborhood in silence through empty streets. His body ached from lack of sleep, but as the days went by, something strange began to happen. Around the 20th day, Thomas started waking up before the alarm rang. The fatigue didn't disappear completely, but it was no longer overwhelming. His mind grew clearer. The Excel lessons began to make sense. He understood how to use functions, how to organize data, how to look at numbers and see problems hidden inside them. By the second month, the new rhythm of life had become a habit. Morning walks were no longer a chore, but the part of the day Thomas looked forward to the most. He noticed that he breathed more deeply, walked more lightly, and thought more clearly. He finished his first Excel course, then moved on to basic accounting. For the first time in many years, Thomas felt that he was moving forward, even if it was slowly. On the 90th day, Thomas looked back and barely recognized himself. He wasn't rich, not yet, but he was healthier, more confident, and most importantly, no longer someone who was merely surviving. Every morning when he woke up at 5 a.m., Thomas knew he had won a small victory, and it was these small victories, quietly piling up, that were changing his life. The change didn't arrive with applause or dramatic moments. It came quietly, beginning right in the place where Thomas had once believed his entire life would be buried. After nearly 3 months of silent study, he started applying what he had learned to his job as a security guard at the warehouse. Thomas noticed that operations were chaotic, with incoming and outgoing inventory poorly tracked. In the calm early mornings at 5 a.m., he created a simple Excel spreadsheet to record and reorganize the entire stock system. When he showed the spreadsheet to his manager, Thomas expected nothing significant, but their reaction surprised him. For the first time, the warehouse became clear and easy to manage. Information moved faster, errors dropped. The question people asked was no longer, "How does this work?" but "Where did you learn this?" Thomas answered simply, "I wake up at 5 a.m. and teach myself." The news gradually reached upper management. On the 87th day since he began his 5 a.m. journey, Thomas was called into the office. The company was expanding its internal accounting department and needed someone who understood both warehouse operations and basic bookkeeping. The offer was straightforward: a daytime position, double the salary, and a more stable job. Thomas stood still for a few seconds. 3 months earlier, he had been an anonymous security guard. Now, his life had just taken a completely different turn. A year later, Thomas became the company's chief accountant. He moved his mother to the city, ensured she received proper medical care, and they lived in a decent, bright apartment. But what made him most proud wasn't the title or the money. It was the fact that every morning, at exactly 5 a.m., He still woke up, not because he needed to prove anything, but because he understood that those hours had saved his life. When he called Mr. Chun to share the news, Thomas said only one sentence: "I didn't give up." On the other end of the line, Mr. Chun smiled softly. "Good, because success isn't what you achieve, it's who you become." And for Thomas, 5 a.m. was no longer a strategy to change his life, it had become his life.